he traded his family for fame. Years later, 4 little strangers called him Daddy. The goodbye he never saw coming. When Ethan Cole looked in the mirror, he saw exactly the man he had once dreamed of becoming. Founder and CEO of one of Silicon Valley's fastest-growing AI companies. A face on the cover of Forbes. A calendar booked solid with red carpet galas, investor meetings, and luxury retreats. At just 37, Ethan had become a man the world watched, admired, envied, but not one anyone really knew. He had everything, except the one thing he quietly left behind. Grace. Grace Miller had been with Ethan before the suits, before the jet-set life, before the world decided his name was worth whispering in boardrooms. Back when he was just a broke coder with dreams too big for their tiny apartment in downtown San Jose. Back when they shared Chinese takeout on the floor, because the only furniture they owned was a second-hand couch with a rip down the side. She believed in him, not just in his ideas, but in him. She had supported him through every failed pitch, every sleepless night, every panic spiral before product launches, all while juggling overnight shifts at the Children's Hospital and studying for her medical boards. She never once asked for more than honesty and time. 2 things Ethan would one day run out of. At some point, their lives stopped overlapping. He would return from trips that took him to Paris, Dubai, Tokyo, each city adding another layer between them. Grace stayed behind, not because she couldn't follow, but because she chose her calling over the chaos. She loved her patients, the families, the community clinic that could barely afford new thermometers, but always had lines out the door. It mattered to her, deeply. Ethan admired her loyalty, until it started to feel like resistance, like she wasn't evolving fast enough, like maybe, just maybe, he had outgrown the woman who once grounded him. Then came Sienna Blake. She was everything his new life demanded, captivating, unburdened, and curious about him. Not the version Grace had built with him. They met at a charity gala for children's tech literacy. Ironic, considering how little Ethan knew about the children's wing Grace ran 3 nights a week. Sienna was bold, breathtaking, in a way that made rooms hush when she entered. And she looked at him like he was more than a tech mogul, like he was still fascinating. Ethan was drunk on the thrill of being seen again, not for his potential, but for the power he now held. It wasn't immediate. That's what he told himself. It started as conversations over drinks, then private dinners, then late-night drives to nowhere. By the time he admitted it to himself, he was already too far gone. The guilt he felt became something he treated like a negotiable debt, one he could settle later. But Grace never asked. She must have known. She was too intuitive not to. There was a stillness in her, like the pause before a storm. She didn't question the extra nights away or the vague calendar entries. She simply stepped back until one evening, Ethan came home to find the lights dimmed, a small chocolate cake on the counter, and a card with his name in her familiar, looping handwriting. He had forgotten. Their anniversary. Again. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, still wearing her scrubs. There was exhaustion in her eyes, but also clarity. He knew what he had to do. He thought he was being brave when he handed her the envelope, the divorce papers printed on thick, cream-colored stock. Professionally done, just like everything else in his life now. She didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't scream. She just opened the envelope, read it once, and looked up at him with eyes that no longer held hope, only quiet understanding. "I see," was all she said. It undid him more than any outburst could have. "You deserve more," Ethan offered, grasping at something kind to say, something to make this easier. Grace placed the papers gently on the counter, right beside the uneaten cake. "What I deserved," she said softly, "was to be fought for." He didn't sleep that night, but the next morning, he left anyway. Sienna moved into his new penthouse within a month. A minimalist paradise of glass, marble, and views that stretched over all of San Francisco. No memories, no framed photos, just curated success. Ethan posted carefully crafted photos, smiled in interviews, threw himself into the next product launch. He didn't look back. He didn't know that just a week after he left, Grace sat in a doctor's office, staring at an ultrasound screen with wide, disbelieving eyes. She hadn't told Ethan she'd missed her period, or about the nausea, or the dreams she kept having. 4 cribs, 4 names, 4 heartbeats. She thought it was a mistake, an echo, a glitch in the system. But the doctor confirmed it. 4 perfect lives. She didn't call Ethan, not because she wanted to punish him, but because she knew the moment he signed those papers, he had already left. Left her, left their life, and now, unknowingly, left them. She would not ask him to return out of obligation. She would not drag her children into a life built on fame and absence. So she chose to raise them alone, to build something different. And as she placed her hand over her stomach that night, feeling the gravity of it all, she whispered to the quiet, "You are not alone, I promise." Years would pass before Ethan saw Grace again, and when he did, he wouldn't see just her. He would see the pieces of himself he never knew he left behind. 4 children, 4 strangers, and one word that would break everything open. Daddy. A new kind of strength. Grace never imagined she'd become a mother of 4, let alone all at once. In the early days, it felt surreal. There were moments when she would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, hand resting on her growing belly, wondering if she was dreaming or if life was playing the most unexpected trick. The pregnancy was high risk. Every appointment came with cautions, every week with new challenges. But Grace met each one with the kind of quiet resilience she had built her entire life around. Not the loud, look at me kind, the steady, stubborn, unbreakable kind. She didn't take a single day off from the clinic until she physically couldn't stand for more than an hour without fainting. Even then, she worked from home, reviewing charts, consulting parents over video calls, and checking in on her most vulnerable patients. Her team rallied behind her. They brought meals, folded baby clothes, and built cribs after their shifts ended. It wasn't just support, it was love. The kind that fills the space when family no longer fits its old definition. When the day finally came, one cold November morning after a long, restless night, the nurses at the maternity ward welcomed her like she was one of their own. And in many ways, she was. Not just a patient, but a sister, a friend, a fighter. The delivery was long, complicated, but when it was over, and she heard 4 cries echoing through the sterile white of the delivery room, she broke down. Not from fear, but from awe. Jasper, Milo, Lily, Ava. 4 tiny souls, each one different, each one whole. Holding them, even for just a moment. felt like holding 4 futures in the palms of her hands. The first year was a blur. Sleep was a fantasy. Showers were luxuries. Sanity became a moving target. But Grace was relentless. She learned to sleep in 10-minute windows, to feed 2 babies while rocking another with her foot and humming lullabies through a cracked voice. She learned the power of baby wearing, bulk cooking, and saying no to things that didn't matter. There were breakdowns, yes. Nights she cried into the sink, while bottles soaked in warm water. Moments when she stared out the window, wondering if she was still the woman she used to be, or just someone surviving. But then came the little things. The first time Jasper smiled at her. The way Milo always curled his fingers around hers when he fell asleep. How Lily would babble nonsense stories while reading board books upside down. And Ava, sweet, intuitive Ava, who always seemed to know when her mama needed a hug, crawling over with arms outstretched like an old soul in a baby's body. Grace didn't need to look back, because everything she needed was right in front of her. As the years passed, the brownstone she had nearly lost in the divorce became their sanctuary. The living room walls became a gallery of handprints, scribbled stick figure families, and watercolor explosions. Her weekends became messy and magical, filled with birthday parties where everyone wore crowns made of paper, picnics in the park with juice boxes and mismatched socks, and late-night baking sessions where the flour always ended up on the floor. They didn't have much, but they had enough. Grace still worked at the clinic. Slowly, as the kids grew, she built something bigger, a small network of community pediatric centers that focused on family care, education, and early development, funded by grants. Staffed by people who believed, like she did, that healing happened when you truly saw people. She never once used Ethan's name, never sought child support, never contacted him, not because of pride, but because the choice had been his. And she would never make her children pay for someone else's silence. Instead, she focused on raising them to believe in love, not loss, in truth, not bitterness. Jasper became the little protector. He helped Grace with groceries, tucked his sister's toys away, and always checked the locks before bed. He was observant, like his father, but thoughtful, like his mother. Milo was the dreamer. He asked big questions like, why do stars die? And, if I build a robot, can it have feelings? His imagination was endless. Lily was a firecracker. She ran before she walked, climbed before she crawled, and challenged everyone to keep up. Grace often joked that she was a hurricane with a heart. Ava remained Grace's anchor. Sensitive, soft-spoken, but sharp. She would sit quietly during chaos, and then whisper things that pierced straight to the soul. Grace taught them to make their beds, say thank you, share their snacks, and speak up when something felt wrong. She taught them to be kind, to be curious, to be brave, and she taught them, gently, that sometimes people leave, but that doesn't mean they weren't loved. It just means they weren't ready. The kids asked about their dad sometimes, in small ways. Did he like peanut butter or jelly? Was he tall? Does he know we exist? Grace always answered honestly, but never with pain. He was someone I loved once, someone who had a different path, and I don't know if he knows. But what I do know is, he missed out on something amazing. Years passed. The kids turned 5, then 6. They started school, made friends, discovered favorite colors and irrational fears. One day, A local nonprofit invited Grace to a benefit gala. She wasn't planning to go. She hated these things. But the clinic was being honored, and the kids were set to perform with their school choir. So she put on a dress, kissed their foreheads, and promised snacks after the show. She never expected what came next. Ethan, sitting at a table in the back, his name on the donor list. He had no idea she'd be there, and even less idea that he was about to hear 4 little voices that would sound hauntingly familiar. The unseen, threads of connection. In the quiet moments of the night, when the world was asleep and the city lights dimmed to a soft glow, Emily often found herself reflecting on the choices that had led her to this point. The solitude of her apartment was both a comfort and a reminder of the life she had built alone. Her days were filled with the laughter and chaos of 4 energetic children, each with their own unique personality. There was Lily, the eldest, always looking out for her younger siblings with a maturity beyond her years. Max, the curious one, constantly asking questions about the world around him. Sophie, the creative soul, expressing herself through art and music. And Jake, the youngest, whose infectious smile could brighten even the darkest day. Emily had become adept at juggling the responsibilities of single motherhood, her career, and the emotional complexities that came with both. She had learned to find joy in the small victories, a successful school project, a peaceful bedtime routine, a spontaneous dance party in the living room. Yet, beneath the surface, there was an undercurrent of longing, a desire for connection, for someone to share the burdens and the triumphs. She often wondered if the children's father ever thought about them, if he regretted the path he had chosen. One day, while attending a community event at the local park, Emily's thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice. Turning around, she was met with the sight of Michael, the man who had once been her partner, now standing before her with a mixture of surprise and hesitation. "Emily," he said, his voice tinged with emotion. She nodded, acknowledging his presence, unsure of what to say. "I didn't expect to see you here," he continued. "It's a community event," she replied, her tone neutral. Michael glanced at the children, who were playing nearby, their laughter echoing through the park. "Are they?" he began, trailing off. "Yes," Emily confirmed, her gaze steady. A silence settled between them, filled with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. "I didn't know," Michael finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily nodded, understanding the weight of his realization. "I want to be a part of their lives," he said, determination in his eyes. "It's not that simple," she replied, her voice firm yet compassionate. Over the following weeks, Michael made efforts to reconnect with the children, attending school events, joining them for outings, and slowly building a rapport. Emily watched as the children warmed up to him, their initial skepticism giving way to curiosity and eventually affection. Through these interactions, Emily and Michael began to rebuild their relationship, not as romantic partners, but as co-parents united in their love for their children. They learned to communicate effectively, to support each other, and to prioritize the well-being of their family. In time, the children came to see Michael as a constant presence in their lives, someone they could rely on and trust. Emily found solace in the shared responsibilities and the renewed sense of partnership. The journey was not without its challenges, but together, they navigated the complexities of their new dynamic, forging a path forward rooted in mutual respect and a shared commitment to their children's happiness. As Emily sat on the porch one evening, watching the children play in the yard, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The threads of connection, once frayed and broken, had been mended, creating a tapestry of love, resilience, and hope. In the end, it was not the fame or the fortune that defined their lives, but the bonds they had nurtured, the memories they had created, and the family they had become. The reckoning of regret and the roots of forgiveness. Michael had never believed in fate. He'd built his empire with grit, not grace, with spreadsheets, not signs from the universe. But the day he walked into that park and locked eyes with 4 little humans who looked unmistakably like him, something shifted. For the first time in a decade, he didn't feel like a billionaire. He felt like a man who had missed everything that mattered. In the weeks that followed that first encounter, Michael made it his mission to be there, but not just physically. He showed up at soccer games and piano recitals, volunteered to help with science fair projects, even braved an awkward parent-teacher conference where the teacher mistakenly thought he was Emily's new husband. Emily had corrected it gently, but the moment stuck in Michael's mind. He was not a husband, not even a father, not yet. He was still a stranger with matching DNA. It was Jaden, the eldest, who kept the biggest distance. He was careful, guarded, the kind of kid who watched before he spoke and didn't hand out trust like candy. Michael respected that. He didn't push. Instead, he sat on the sidelines of Jaden's Saturday morning basketball practice, clapping quietly every time Jaden made a shot, even if Jaden never looked his way. One morning, after practice, Michael noticed Jaden sitting alone by the vending machine, frowning at the screen. Michael approached slowly. "Need help?" Jaden shrugged. "It's broken." Michael pulled $1 from his wallet and handed it to him without a word. Jaden inserted it, punched a few buttons, and grabbed his granola bar. "Thanks," Jaden muttered, then added, "You don't have to come to these things, you know." Michael sat beside him. "I want to." "Why?" Michael didn't flinch. "Because I missed a lot of things, and I don't want to miss any more." Jaden didn't reply, but he didn't get up either. That was something. Meanwhile, Max had questions, endless ones, about Michael's work, about the tech company he'd founded, about how computers talk to each other. "You're kind of like Iron Man," Max had said one afternoon, eyes wide. "Maybe without the suit," Michael replied with a laugh. Sophie didn't ask questions. She offered him drawings. Every time he visited, she'd hand him a folded piece of paper. Stick figure families, rainbows, unicorns. One day, she gave him a sketch of a house with 6 people standing outside. Her siblings, Emily, and a tall figure labeled Michael. She had drawn him with a red heart above his head. He didn't cry then. But that night, he sat alone in his penthouse, silent, glass of untouched wine in hand, and let every wall crack. It was Liv, though, who undid him completely. She didn't speak much. She didn't run to him like Zoe, or ask questions like Max. But she had a way of sitting beside him, wordless, quiet, still, that made him feel more seen than he ever had in boardrooms full of powerful people. One evening, during a rainy pickup from ballet class, Emily had to run back inside to grab Sophie's forgotten shoes. Michael waited in the car with Liv. Out of nowhere, she said, "You smell like my brother." Michael blinked. "Which one?" "All of them," he chuckled. "That's probably because I'm your dad." Liv tilted her head. "I know." You do? She nodded. You feel like us. Michael turned to look at her, trying to stay composed. Thank you, Liv. That means a lot. She leaned her head against the window and added, but don't mess it up. He laughed through a lump in his throat. I'll do my best. For Emily, watching all of this unfold was a cocktail of relief, anxiety, and something dangerously close to hope. Michael was trying, really trying, and not in the flashy way she had feared, not with toys or checks or Instagrammable weekends. He was just present. He helped carry groceries, picked up the kids from school when she had long shifts, texted her photos of Zoe's latest dirt-covered adventure in the yard. Sometimes they even shared coffee on her front steps in comfortable silence. Still, she kept her guard up. She'd spent too long patching up the broken pieces he left behind. Trust wasn't something she handed out twice. One evening, as they stood in her modest kitchen while the kids did homework in the living room, Michael finally asked the question that had lingered between them for months. Why didn't you tell me about the pregnancy? She stirred sugar into her tea, her movements slow, measured. You were already gone, Michael. Your body might have been in the apartment, but your heart had left long before. He nodded, not arguing. I thought maybe if I told you, you'd feel obligated to stay, and I didn't want my children to be someone's obligation. I wouldn't have... She held up a hand. I'm not saying that to hurt you. I'm just saying you left, and I did what I had to do. Michael looked down. I wish I could go back. Emily sighed. You can't. But you're here now. That's what matters. There was a long pause. Then she said something that caught even herself off guard. They love you, you know. Even Jaden. He's just stubborn. Michael's face softened. I love them too. More than I ever thought possible. She looked at him, eyes guarded but honest. Then don't make me regret letting you in. I won't, he said, and for the first time, she almost believed him. It wasn't long after that conversation when the kids started asking to stay over at Michael's apartment. They called it Dad's Tower. Michael panicked a little the first night they stayed. He spent hours child-proofing surfaces, hiding expensive sculptures, and trying to figure out how to cook eggs 4 different ways. They ended up ordering pizza. They played board games on his living room floor, watched cartoons on a projector that had once been reserved for business presentations, and fell asleep in sleeping bags on the plush rug. At 2 a.m., Michael sat in the dark, watching them breathe. He didn't need a DNA test to know they were his. He could see it in their dreams. And yet, for all the progress, one moment reminded them both just how fragile everything still was. It was during Zoe's birthday. Michael had planned something special, a backyard treasure hunt, her favorite cake, a DIY fairy costume. He invited his assistant to help coordinate the surprise. What he didn't expect was paparazzi. A gossip site had gotten wind of tech billionaire reconnecting with secret children, and before he could shield them, the photos were out. Emily saw them online at 11 p.m. that night. Zoe's face, Jaden's profile, her address in the background. She called Michael, her voice shaking. You said no press, no cameras. I didn't call them, Emily. I swear. I have no idea how... I don't care how it happened. My kids are not your redemption arc. Michael went quiet. I trusted you, she whispered. Michael responded, voice low. Let me fix it. She didn't say no, but she didn't say yes either. The next morning, Michael pulled every connection he had. Within 24 hours, the photos were scrubbed. The media issued retractions. A quiet, expensive apology. But it wasn't about the photos. It was about what they meant. That night, Michael knocked on her door. Not with excuses, but with a simple sentence. "I know I broke something, but I'm not leaving this time." Emily looked at him, exhausted, wary. Then she opened the door a little wider. "Good," she said. "Because the kids already made you a drawing." He smiled. "Does it have a unicorn?" She nodded. "And a volcano." Perfect. What no one told Michael about fatherhood was this. It doesn't arrive all at once. It sneaks up on you, in lunchbox notes, in middle-of-the-night fevers, in questions like, "Why is the sky blue?" or "Do you love Mom?" It's not one big moment. It's 1,000 small ones. And slowly, beautifully, painfully, he was becoming their dad. The long road to being chosen. I never imagined that a simple knock on my door could unravel the tightly wound threads of my carefully constructed life. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the kind that makes you want to curl up with a book and a cup of tea. The kids were napping, and I was savoring a rare moment of silence when the doorbell rang. Standing there, drenched and disheveled, was a man I hadn't seen in over a decade. James, my ex-husband. The man who had traded our family for fame, who had walked away without a backward glance, now stood on my porch, eyes filled with something I couldn't quite decipher. "Hi, Clara," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I stood frozen, memories flooding back. Our wedding day, the birth of our children, the night he left. I wanted to slam the door, to protect the life I had rebuilt from the wreckage he left behind. But something in his eyes stopped me. "Can we talk?" he asked. Reluctantly, I stepped aside, allowing him into the home that had never known his presence. He looked around, taking in the family photos, the children's drawings on the fridge, the evidence of a life that had continued without him. "I know I have no right to be here," he began, "but I needed to see you, to see them." I sat across from him, arms crossed, heart guarded. "Why now, James? After all these years?" He looked down, shame etched into every line of his face. I was wrong. I thought I needed to chase success, to be someone important, but in doing so, I lost everything that truly mattered. I wanted to scream, to tell him that his epiphany came too late. But as I looked at him, I saw not the man who had abandoned us, but someone broken, seeking redemption. "The kids," he continued, "they don't know me, but I want to, if you'll let me." I thought of our children, how they had grown without a father, how they had asked about him, how I had tried to fill the void he left. Could I allow him back into their lives? Could I trust him not to hurt them again? "I don't know," I said honestly. "It's not just about me, it's about them." He nodded, understanding. "I want to earn their trust, and yours, whatever it takes." Over the next few weeks, James began to show up, not just physically, but emotionally. He attended school events, helped with homework, played in the yard. The children were wary at first, but gradually they warmed to him, their laughter filling the house in ways I hadn't heard in years. One evening, as we sat watching the kids play, James turned to me. "Thank you for giving me this chance." I looked at him, the man who had once broken my heart, now mending it piece by piece. "It's not about me," I replied. "It's about them. They deserve to know their father." He smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. "And I intend to be the father they deserve." Rebuilding trust wasn't easy. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, and lingering pain. But with each passing day, James proved his commitment, not through grand gestures, but through consistency, presence, and love. One night, as I tucked the kids into bed, our youngest looked up at me. "Mommy, is Daddy staying this time?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Yes, sweetheart, he's staying." In that moment, I realized that forgiveness isn't about forgetting the past, but about choosing to believe in the possibility of a better future. James had traded his family for fame, but now he was choosing us, and we were choosing to let him. Fathers don't just leave. They fight to stay. James had never known silence to be so loud, until the day he stood at the edge of the schoolyard, clutching a brown paper bag filled with peanut butter sandwiches and apple slices. He watched from behind the fence as 4 little figures in matching backpacks ran out of the school building, their laughter like wind chimes in the spring breeze. He didn't approach. Not yet. Today wasn't his day. The arrangement had been fragile from the start, like handling glass after it had already cracked. Clara had made it clear. He could show up, slowly, quietly, but he couldn't expect a grand welcome. He wasn't their father yet, not in the way that mattered, but he was there. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he came to the school, waited across the street, and followed the children and their nanny at a distance, just enough for them to know he was real, just close enough that they could choose to wave. Some days, Zoe ran to the fence and shouted, "Hi, Mr. James!" Other days, Liv just looked at him with those wide, searching eyes. And sometimes they didn't acknowledge him at all. He accepted it. Every minute near them felt like a chance to rewrite the past. He knew the ink would never dry clean, but maybe, if he was careful, he could still draw something whole from the wreckage. Clara watched him too, not always, not obviously, but she saw him from her office window as she wrapped up her last therapy session. She saw him lean against the lamppost like it was holding up the weight of his regrets. She saw the lunch bag in his hand. She saw the way his eyes lit up when one of the kids glanced his way. She saw all of it, and it tore at her in ways she didn't want to admit. He had left. That was fact. But now, he stayed. That was undeniable. It was that truth that made everything more complicated. What no one else saw was how much James had changed behind closed doors. He had downsized his life, traded the city skyline for a modest 1-bedroom near the children's school. He had learned to cook meals that didn't come with white tablecloths or wait staff. He took parenting classes online. He read books about childhood trauma, resilience, and single parenting. He wasn't trying to win favor. He was trying to learn how to love without entitlement. He even stopped drinking, entirely. His once glamorous girlfriend, Ava Monroe, an interior designer with a social media following larger than most news networks, had been confused at first. "You want to live in a neighborhood full of strollers and bake sales?" she asked him one evening, twirling a wine glass between her fingers. James didn't answer. He was packing. "You're throwing away our life for some moral atonement tour?" "No," he said softly. "I'm just showing up where I should have in the first place." She didn't follow him out the door. At first, Clara had kept the children at a distance. She didn't want them confused. She didn't want them hurt. And deep down, she didn't want to admit to herself that part of her still noticed the way James smiled when he saw them, or how her heart betrayed her by softening, just a little, each time he bent down to tie Liv's shoelaces or help Malik carry his science project. But just when she thought maybe, just maybe, she could entertain the possibility of something changing, Heather appeared. Heather Langford was everything Clara wasn't. Tall, elegant, never flustered, always perfectly styled in long cashmere coats and heels too delicate for city sidewalks. She was the type of woman who turned heads without meaning to. And she wasn't just beautiful. She was warm, patient, and, as Clara found out one afternoon during pickup, surprisingly close to James. They were laughing, the kind of laughter that carried history, and Heather was leaning in close, her hand resting lightly on James's forearm, like she belonged there. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She didn't confront him. She didn't say a word, but that night, when James texted her to confirm next week's school event, she took a little longer to respond. The next day, she didn't glance out her window. And when Malik mentioned that Mr. James brought extra cookies for everyone, she smiled politely and said nothing. Her heart was at war, because the James she was seeing now, the man who kneeled to fix Liv's hair, who helped Jaden study for math tests, who stood silently in the rain just to catch a glimpse of them. He wasn't the James who had left. But did that mean he had changed? Could a man really change if another woman was waiting in the wings? James noticed the distance before she said anything. Clara had a way of turning cold without raising her voice, of creating emotional borders that even a father desperate for redemption couldn't cross. And still, he didn't blame her. He knew what he had broken. He also knew he hadn't earned the right to rebuild it on his own timeline. One Saturday, after the kids' soccer game, he finally asked, "Is something wrong?" Clara hesitated. "No, just tired." He gave her a look. "Clara," she sighed, "I saw you with her." He blinked. "Heather? Is that what she goes by?" He nodded. She's just a friend, an old one. I'm not seeing her." Clara didn't speak for a moment. "Look, I don't know what you think you saw, but I promise you, Heather isn't here for me. She was actually helping me find a therapist. For the kids, for myself." Clara's brows furrowed. "What?" "She runs a clinic now, for men recovering from emotional trauma and addictive behaviors. I reached out months ago." Clara looked away. Her voice was quieter now. "You should have told me." James stepped closer. Not too close. "I was scared," he admitted. "I didn't want to make it feel like I was rushing anything. I just wanted to do better. Quietly. Consistently." She nodded slowly, and for the first time, she didn't pull away. What neither of them knew was that 4 little co-conspirators were already working behind the scenes. Jaden had noticed the way his mother looked at James when she thought no one was watching. Liv, ever intuitive, had asked one night, "Why does Mommy's smile get smaller when she sees Mr. James with other ladies?" Zoe, never one for subtlety, declared at breakfast, "I think we should lock Mommy and Daddy in a room together and not let them out until they're hugging." And Malik, with his usual calm logic, said, "We can't do that, but maybe we can plan something they'll both like." So, the mission Get Mommy and Daddy Back Together began. Step 1. Convince James to bring to Clara her favorite chocolate croissants from the bakery she used to visit every Saturday morning before the divorce. Step 2. Ask Clara for help planning a parent appreciation day at school, but make sure she doesn't know James has already volunteered. Step 3. Get Liv to draw a family portrait with all 6 of them and accidentally leave it on Clara's desk. Step 4. Make sure Zoe tells Heather, in no uncertain terms, "You're really pretty, but we like our real mom best." Step 4 was not approved by Malik, but Zoe insisted. The plan worked better than anyone expected. Clara's walls began to soften, not from grand gestures, but from the little things. The way James remembered she liked extra lemon in her tea. The way he stayed late at school events to help clean up. The way he never, not once, asked for forgiveness, only for time. She noticed the difference. So did her mother. And that became the next wall to climb. "Clara," her mother said one evening, "you know I've always respected your choices, but I worry about this regression." "It's not regression, Mom." "Then what is it? Nostalgia? Guilt?" Clara folded her hands. "He's trying. So was he, once, before he left." Clara looked away. "People change. Some do, some don't. But that man shattered you. I held you while you cried. I watched you fall apart. And I rebuilt myself," Clara whispered. "Without him, that's true. But maybe now, I get to choose whether I want to let him in again. Not because I'm weak, but because I'm stronger." Her mother sighed. "Just don't let your children pay the price for your hope." "They won't," Clara said quietly. "They're the reason I'm even considering it." Later that night, James waited outside her apartment building with a shoebox. Clara opened the door, confused. "What's this?" "I found them," he said. "Letters I wrote, never sent." She hesitated, then took the box. Inside were folded papers, some yellowed at the edges, all written in his unmistakable scrawl. "I wrote you every week for a year after I left. I just never had the courage to send them. But I want you to have them now. Not because I expect anything, just because I want you to know I never stopped thinking of you or them." Clara didn't speak. She nodded once and closed the door. That night, she sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by 4 sleeping children and 1 shoebox full of second chances. She read every word, and by the time the sun rose, she realized something. Love wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about history, either. It was about presence, about choosing, again and again. And sometimes that meant being brave enough to open a door that once brought pain, just to see if maybe this time it could bring something else. When forgiveness becomes the hardest choice. Clara stood still by the window of her mother's kitchen, watching the golden afternoon light spilling across the quiet yard. In the distance, she could see the familiar swing set where her children played when they visited. Their laughter had faded with the seasons, replaced now by the thrum of adult complications and a kind of silence that spoke louder than words. Behind her, the kettle whistled softly. She didn't move. The image of James kneeling in the park, tying Zoe's shoelace, had been burned into her mind like sunlight behind closed eyes. He had looked so natural, so instinctively fatherly, and yet she couldn't shake the undercurrent of doubt gnawing at her heart. "He seems sincere now," she had whispered once to her mother. But where was all this love 5 years ago? Her mother, always direct, had taken a sip of her tea before replying. "People don't change so easily, Clara. Don't forget what he left behind. Don't forget who stayed." Clara wanted to believe that James had changed, that the man who once traded his family for fame had finally found the part of himself that had been lost in boardrooms and empty applause. But belief, she realized, wasn't always enough, especially when trust had to be rebuilt, not only with her children, but with her own heart. To complicate things further, there was her, Isabel Lang. She was poised, elegant, and completely aware of her effect on people. Clara had first noticed her at the children's school fundraiser, her laughter floating like music through the crowd. At first, Clara thought she was just another parent, but when she saw James glance at Isabel, too quickly, too carefully, something inside her stirred. Isabel was not just around, she was interested. And James, despite his gentle boundaries, wasn't pushing her away fast enough. That evening, back at home, Clara found herself pacing. She had no claim on James anymore. He was free to date whoever he pleased. But that didn't stop the ache. It didn't stop the bitterness that crawled up her throat like smoke in a sealed room. And the worst part? Her kids loved him now. They talked about him constantly. How he taught Jackson to fix a bike tire. How he helped Liv with her science fair project. How he remembered to pack Zoe's favorite sandwich without crusts. They were warming to him in ways Clara hadn't dared to hope for, or fear, because if they accepted him fully, it meant she had to, or at least confront the possibility. One Saturday morning, the children cornered her in the living room. Zoe stood with her arms crossed, a mischievous sparkle in her eyes. Liv sat beside her, nervously clutching a paper heart. Jackson and Max tried to act casual, but Clara could see it. They were up to something. "What's going on?" she asked, lowering her book. Zoe grinned. "We think you should go on a date." Clara blinked. "I'm sorry. What?" "With Daddy," Max added, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Clara sat upright. "Did he put you up to this?" All four children shook their heads furiously. "No way!" Zoe declared. "We did it ourselves." Jackson stepped forward. "He's different now, Mom. He really is." Liv handed her the paper heart. On it, in crayon, were the words, "Please give Daddy a second chance." Clara felt her throat tighten. She swallowed hard. "Kids, you know I love you more than anything, right?" They nodded. "And you know that love sometimes means protecting you, even when it's hard?" They nodded again, slower this time. She looked down at the paper. It was uneven, misspelled, but it was real. It was full of hope. Later that day, Clara sat with James at a quiet corner cafe near the marina. It was a place they used to come to in the early years, back when dreams were all they had and ambition hadn't yet turned into a cage. James looked at her across the table, unsure if he was allowed to smile. "The kids set us up, didn't they?" he said, voice soft. Clara nodded. "They think we should give this, whatever this is, another try." James looked down. "Do you?" She hesitated. "I don't know." That honesty landed heavy between them. James didn't flinch. "I don't expect you to," he said, after a long pause. "I messed up, Clara. I don't think a sorry will ever be enough." "No, it won't," she replied. "But what do you want from me now?" He exhaled. "Not forgiveness. Not yet. Just the chance to keep showing up, like I should have, from the beginning." That night, Clara lay awake, staring at the ceiling. In her chest, a storm swirled. Her mind kept circling back to Isabel, to the knowing glances, the shared space, to how easy it would be for James to fall for someone like her. Beautiful, uncomplicated, unscarred by his past. When she finally drifted off, her dreams were filled with echoes of her children calling out, "Mom, he's here," only to see James standing hand in hand with someone else. Days passed, then weeks. Clara kept her distance. James respected it, and yet he kept finding ways to be present. He fixed the leaky pipe in the bathroom without being asked. He showed up to every parent-teacher meeting, every play, every weekend soccer game. He never pushed, and strangely, that was what made Clara's walls start to shift. Then one afternoon, her mother called. "I saw him," she said without preamble. Clara froze. "James?" "Yes, with her." Clara closed her eyes. "Mom, please. I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying this because you need to be careful. He left you once, Clara. Don't let your heart walk you into another mistake." Clara didn't respond, but the conversation replayed itself endlessly over the next few days. That weekend, the kids asked if James could join them for dinner at home. Clara agreed, on one condition. "It's just dinner," she warned herself. "That's all." The night was simple. Home-cooked pasta, laughter, games. At one point, Liv climbed into James's lap and whispered, "I hope you never leave again." His eyes met Clara's then, full of something raw and unspoken, and just like that, she knew. She wasn't ready to love him again, but she wanted to be. Still, one thing remained unspoken between them: Isabel. A few nights later, Clara finally asked, "Are you seeing her?" James looked genuinely surprised. "Isabel?" Clara crossed her arms. "Yes, her." He rubbed the back of his neck. "She showed interest. I didn't pursue it." "But you didn't stop her either." "No, not at first. I thought maybe it was safer to keep something simple, disconnected. But the truth is, I couldn't go through with it, because every time I looked at her, I thought of you." Silence. Then, very quietly, he added, "I'm not running from the hard stuff anymore, Clara. I'm not choosing easy. I'm choosing what matters. And that's you. That's them." It wasn't a confession. It was a vow. And Clara, for the first time in years, let herself believe him, let herself hope. But not everything was resolved. A few days later, Isabel showed up at Clara's clinic. Clara's receptionist buzzed her. "There's a Ms. Lang asking for you." Clara walked out into the waiting area to find Isabel standing in designer heels and a smile too polished to be kind. "I wanted to talk," Isabel said. Woman to woman. Clara's posture straightened. "I don't think we have anything to say to each other." "I think we do," Isabel replied. "I care about James, and I think he's making a mistake going backwards." Clara's jaw tensed. "You mean going home?" Isabel smirked. "Whatever you want to call it. But let's be honest. Do you really want him back? Or do you just hate the idea of someone else having him?" Clara stared at her for a long time. Then she said, voice cool and even, "He's not a trophy. He's a father, and he's finally acting like one." Isabel laughed softly. "Well, we'll see how long that lasts." She turned on her heel and left. Clara stood frozen, her pulse thudding in her ears. But she didn't cry. She didn't break, because deep down, she realized she no longer feared losing James. She feared losing the version of herself that had finally remembered her own worth. That night, Clara told the kids that maybe, just maybe, James would be spending more time around. Zoe squealed. Max jumped. Jackson tried to play it cool, but failed. Liv just smiled and whispered, "Told you so." As they drifted off to bed, Clara found herself sitting on the porch steps, the night air crisp and clear. She felt someone sit beside her. James. I heard, he said, about Isabel. She came to my work. He grimaced. I'm sorry. Clara nodded. Then, after a long silence, I'm not angry. He blinked. You're not? No, I just needed to know where you stood. James turned toward her, his voice thick. Right here, with you, and for the first time since their world shattered years ago. Clara reached out and took his hand, not because it was easy, but because forgiveness, real forgiveness, wasn't a gift. It was a choice. And tonight, she chose hope. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing again. The rain came unexpectedly that Friday afternoon. Soft, steady, and cleansing. Clara stood by the large window of the pediatric clinic, where she'd poured her heart into her work over the past 5 years. Behind her, colleagues packed up for the day, but her eyes remained fixed on the wet horizon. A decision weighed heavy on her chest. A letter lay folded on her desk. It was from the National Children's Wellness Foundation, offering her a senior leadership position in San Francisco. A dream job, one she'd once thought forever out of reach. It meant better pay, national impact, and full creative control over pediatric care programs. But it also meant leaving Vermont, leaving her gallery, just reopened, leaving the kids' school, and most of all, James. It wasn't long ago that she'd believed love was a closed chapter in her life. Now that chapter had reopened itself, tentatively, imperfectly, and with pages still torn. The children had begun calling him Dad again without prompting. James had learned how to braid Ellie's hair and decode Jackson's silence. They were building something, slowly, carefully. But what if she left now? What if this opportunity was her last chance to reclaim the professional dream she'd shelved the night James walked away? The knock on her office door startled her. Ellie's babysitter smiled from the threshold. Delivery? She grinned, holding out a worn sketch pad Clara hadn't seen in years. Your daughter said to give you this. Inside, on the first page, was a child's drawing of their family. Clara, James, Ellie, Jackson, and 2 cats that did not exist. Below, in Ellie's neatest writing, Mom, this time, don't go alone. Later that evening, Clara returned home to something she couldn't explain. The lights were dimmed. The kitchen, spotless. The children were already asleep. A soft note was taped to the fridge. Come to the backyard. She stepped outside into the misty twilight and froze. The garden shed, once storage for forgotten tools, had been transformed. Where once there was clutter, there were now white walls, hanging lights, and an easel in the center of the room. Paints and brushes were arranged meticulously beside it. Her old works, reframed and restored, lined the back wall like a silent promise. And in the middle of it all stood James. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at her, eyes tired but certain, hands covered in paint, heart on his sleeve. I know I broke it all, he said quietly. Not just us. Your art, your rhythm, your faith in people. Clara stood frozen, tears threatening behind her lashes. So I built this, James continued, gesturing around. Not because I think it fixes everything, but because you gave me space to come back, and I want to give you something that lets you go forward. She swallowed. James, I don't want you to come back to me, he interrupted, voice trembling now. I want to build a life where you never have to leave. Clara looked around the room. At her own dreams returned to her without condition, without pride. Something inside her cracked, but it wasn't pain. It was relief. And maybe it was love again. "I got an offer," she whispered. James nodded. "San Francisco. I heard from the kids." "You didn't ask me?" "I figured if I did, it would sound like I was trying to make it about us. This is your call, Clara. And if you take it, I'll fly the kids to see you every weekend if that's what it takes. But if there's even a small part of you that still believes we could have something, I'll be right here, every day, building that life with you." She stepped forward, slowly, placing her palm over his paint-splattered hand. "I don't know how to choose between what I've worked for and what I've started to feel again." James's eyes softened. "Then maybe you don't have to choose yet. Maybe we just keep showing up for a little longer and see where it leads." 2 days later, Jackson sat by the window of his room, watching the rain tap against the glass. Ellie joined him, legs tucked under her. "Do you think they're going to make it?" Jackson asked softly. Ellie was quiet for a long time. "I think Mom still loves him," she said finally. She looks at him like she's trying not to remember everything good, but still does anyway. Jackson nodded. He looks scared when she's around, but not like he wants to run, like he wants her to stay. There was a pause. "Do you remember when he used to read to us?" Jackson asked. "He always did the robot voice wrong, but you laughed every time." Ellie smiled. "That's when we still lived in the house with the red door." "Yeah," Jackson whispered. "I liked that house." "I like this one too," she said. "But maybe we should let him read to us again, even if he messes up the robot voice." The turning point came unexpectedly. Clara had invited James over for dinner. Her parents were in town, reluctantly. Their last visit had ended with her mother warning, "Don't mistake guilt for growth, Clara. Be careful what you forgive." That night, James cooked. He helped Ellie with the dishes. He asked Clara's father about his old woodworking projects, something the man hadn't spoken of in years. And when Clara's mother pulled her aside later, her voice was softer than expected. "I still don't trust him fully," she said, "but I saw how he watched you tonight. Like someone who doesn't deserve to be there, but is grateful that he is." Clara blinked. "You think I should give him another chance?" "I think maybe you already have." Weeks passed. The job offer remained, but the pressure faded. Clara didn't give an answer. Not to them, not to James. Instead, she painted. In the room James built, she created her first original series in over 6 years. It was called Return, a collection of pieces that spoke of loss, time, rediscovery, and love. Real, weathered, chosen love. On the opening night of the show, hosted in a modest downtown gallery, not in San Francisco, Clara stood beside James and the children. Her mother brought her favorite flowers. Her father helped hang the last canvas. And in the center of the room, Ellie and Jackson proudly led guests to their favorite pieces, quoting titles like Little Curators. One canvas stood out among the rest. It was abstract, layered in warm tones and small fractures. At the bottom right corner, etched into the paint in tiny gold letters, were the words, "Not the end, just the chapter where we both came home." And if this journey touched something in you, if you believe in redemption, real love, and second chances, give this video a like. Hit that follow button for more family stories that stay with you.